This is me Arzu here and I welcome you to my channel Mr. Teeth, where your dental concept get dissected. So this is our first video of the developmental series, and in this video we will be dealing with the development of the mandible, and I have covered all those important points in this video, in this note, that will be very helpful during your university exams. Okay, so without delaying much, let's start our today's topic. So as I have written here, it is the largest and the strongest bone of the face. Okay, so mandible is the largest and strongest bone of the face. So it has two parts, one is body and another is a ramus, and body is and in body there is presence of the alveolar process. Okay, so alveolar process are those processes that consist of the sockets. In those sockets there is a presence of the tooth, okay, particular tooth. After that we can see there another part is a ramus, and the ramus is that part that constitute condyloid process and the coronoid process. Okay, I will be showing you all those parts in the picture. So in this picture of the mandible, we can see the coronoid process, that is in its anterior portion, and the condylar process is in its back portion, in posterior portion. Similarly, we can see the mandibular foramen, and there is a submandibular fossa. Okay, below the mylohyoid ridge, the line that is the ridge that is present there, that is a mylohyoid ridge. The below that line there is a submandibular fossa, and above that there is a sublingual fossa. Similarly, we can see the alveolar processes, okay, and that is containing the tooth. Similarly, we can see the mental foramen, okay, and the mental protuberance in its anterior portion. And the basic part of the mandible is the body and the ramus. Okay, after that, in the development portion, okay, so in the development it is particularly developed from the first branchial arch or the mandibular arch. Okay, so this is a important point and also easy to understand this. Okay, as everyone knows that there are total 5 pharyngeal arches, okay, during the development. First pharyngeal arch, second pharyngeal arch, third pharyngeal arch, fourth pharyngeal arch, and sixth pharyngeal arch. Okay, this is the absence of the fifth pharyngeal arch. Okay, and we will be dealing with all those pharyngeal arches in some other videos, but for now just remember the development of the mandible is from the first branchial arch or the mandibular arch, also we call it has a mandibular arch. Okay, after that in mandibular arch, okay, so it has a particularly two processes. One is maxillary processes and another is a mandibular process. Okay, so mandibular process, they are two in number and they just get fused. Okay, they just get fused and grow and forms a one particular mass. Okay, and that mass gives the lower jaw parts. Okay, so they grow towards each other and will fuse in midline, forming a single mass, and that single mass will form the lower jaw parts. Okay, here in Meckel's cartilage now. Okay, so we can see here it is a cartilage of the first arch. Okay, so it is a cartilage of the first arch. Okay, and after that I have written here it forms the lower jaw in the primitive vertebrates. Okay, okay, so they are forming the lower jaw in the primitive vertebrates, but in our case, okay, it doesn't form the proper mandible. Okay, it doesn't form the lower jaw, it just act as a template for the development of the mandible. I will be dealing with this point later in this my video. So as I have written here, it is a positional relationship in the development of the mandible but have no contribution to it. Okay, so this point wants to tell us that just remember this as a Meckel's cartilage, it forms the lower jaw in the primitive vertebrates, but in our case, okay, but in the upper vertebrates, higher vertebrates, they doesn't form the part of the mandible and or the mandible itself. Okay, but only it forms is that it act as a template. Okay, it act as a template, it helps in the formation of the mandible but doesn't constitute the part during the development of the mandible. Okay, so just remember this is very important. They can ask you in a viva what is the function of the Meckel's cartilage during the formation of the mandible, so just you should tell that they act as a template or they help in the development of the mandible but do not form the part of the development, but they do not form the part of the mandible. Okay, at the 6th week, okay, it extends from the developing otic capsule to the midline of the fused mandibular process. Okay, as the solid hyaline cartilaginous rod surrounded by the fibrocellular capsule. Okay, so during the 6th week of the development, okay, it develops from the otic capsule. So So okay, so just resemble, this is a face of the people. Okay, this is a face of the child, and here we have OT capsule, and here we have a okay OT capsule towards the fused mandibular processes as a solid hyaline. Okay, fused mandibular processes. Okay, so at this position there is a mandibular processes. Okay, as I have discussed here, maxillary process and mandibular process. So the mandibular process is present at this place, so it extends from the OT capsule to the mandibular process. Okay, OT capsule to the mandibular process. At the 6th week, it extends from the developing OT capsule to the midline of the fused mandibular process as a solid hyaline cartilaginous rod. Okay, as a rod. Okay, that is surrounded by the fibrocellular capsule. Okay, this is important. After that, I have written here at the midline, it is separated by the band of the mesenchyme, and the nerve, that is mandibular nerve, first arch nerve, divide it into the lingual nerve and inferior alveolar nerve, which runs medially and laterally. Okay, further inferior. Okay, so this point wants to tell us that, just remember one thing is that, okay, as I have told, okay, Meckel's cartilage, it extends from the developing OT capsule, okay, towards the mandibular process at the midline. Okay, as a solid cartilaginous rod that is surrounded by the fibrocellular capsule. Fibrocellular capsule is present in its outer portion. After that, I have told here in midline. Okay, it is not fused. Okay, so just remember, they are the cartilage. Okay, they come like this. Okay, from the left side, from the right side. Okay, they come from the left side and the right side, but they are not fused in a midline. Okay, but they are separated by a band of the mesenchyme. There is a presence of the band of the mesenchyme. Connective tissue is present between the both the cartilaginous rod. And as I have written here, the mandibular nerve, that is a first arch nerve. Okay, so I will draw this. Okay, so just to think that this is a okay, so this is a Meckel's cartilage of the left side, and this is a Meckel's cartilage of the right side. Okay, extending from the OT capsule towards the midline now, and it is separated in midline by a band of the mesenchyme. Now you guys should remember is that, okay, so the mandibular nerve. Okay, so mandibular nerve is a division of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, so mandibular nerve, it comes from the mandibular nerve, it comes from the trigeminal nerve. Okay, mandibular nerve. Okay, so now, so mandibular nerve is coming like this. Okay, so at this point, okay, it divides into okay, so at this point it divides into two division. Okay, and one is lingual nerve and another is a inferior alveolar nerve. Okay, so it divides into the lingual nerve and one is inferior alveolar nerve. Okay, so just remember why I have drawn like this, that okay, as I have written here, lingual nerve, okay, it runs medially to the Meckel's cartilage and laterally is the inferior alveolar branch. So this is a inferior alveolar nerve. Okay, inferior alveolar nerve, and this is our lingual nerve. And when further inferior alveolar nerve move further towards the midline, okay, it again get divided into the two division. Okay, and I will be discussing with that. Okay, so as I have written here, so incisive and the mental branch. So here again, okay, it gives the two branch. Here again it gives the two branch. Okay, one is incisive branch, another is a mental branch. Okay, and okay, so just remember this diagram, this is so important. Okay, so this is a mental branch and this is a incisive branch. Okay, so we have total 4 nerve I have discussed here. So first of all, I have told mandibular nerve, it came from the trigeminal nerve. Okay, and mandibular nerve get divided into two nerve, one is inferior alveolar nerve, another is a lingual nerve, and they both nerve moves along the Meckel cartilage. Lingual nerve is on the lingual side, inferior alveolar nerve is on the lateral side. After again it moves to the midline, inferior alveolar nerve, it get divided into the another two branches, and that is incisive branch and another is a mental branch. Okay, now So we have got the proper overview. Now let's discuss about it properly. So as I have written here, the condensation of the mesenchyme occurs at the division of the inferior alveolar nerve, and at the 7th week intermembranous ossification begins at their condensation. So I will show you this picture once again. So as I have shown you this, so just think here. Okay, so the division of inferior alveolar nerve is in the mental branch and incisive branch, and at their bifurcation there is a presence of the mesenchyme. Okay, so condensation of the mesenchyme is present there. Condensation of mesenchyme. Okay, condensation of mesenchyme is present here. Okay, so there is a condensation of the mesenchyme, and at that condensation, okay, there is a at 7th week, at around the 7th week, okay, at around 7th week intramembranous ossification begins at that condensation. So after that I have written here, from this point it moves anteriorly towards the midline. Okay, it from this point. Okay, so as this is a condensation of the mesenchyme, it moves anteriorly towards the midline and also moves posteriorly towards the point where the mandibular nerve get divided into the lingual nerve and the inferior alveolar nerve. So just remember this. Okay, so from this point it moves anteriorly towards the midline and posteriorly towards the point where the mandibular nerve divide. Okay, okay, where the mandibular nerve division takes place. Okay, after that, okay, so just remember this picture. Okay, after that I have written, there is a formation of the trough-like structure that consists of the lateral and the medial plates. Okay, and those plates unite beneath the incisive nerve, and at the midline they comes in approximation with another similar trough. Okay, so this point wants to tell us that. Okay, so I will draw here. So there is a development of formation of the two plates. Okay, one is a medial plate, another is a lateral plate. Okay, and this total structure is called trough, and in the trough, in this trough, okay, in this groove, there is a presence of the incisive nerve here. Okay, so there is a presence of the incisive nerve. Okay, that, and on its medial portion there is a medial plate, and on its lateral portion there is a lateral plate. And at the midline, okay, so this structure, this trough is formed in both the cartilage, on the left cartilage and on the right cartilage. Okay, so both the troughs of both the side, okay, they come and approximate at the midline. After that, as another point, as I have written here, it joining both the plates forms the canal containing the incisive nerve. Okay, so this trough, it converted into the canal. Okay, so now it becomes the canal. Okay, that contains the incisive nerve. Okay, so this is an incisive nerve, okay, and this is a canal, incisive nerve. Okay, so this is an incisive nerve and it forms the canal. So trough is getting changed to the canal. Okay, after that I have written the development of the alveolar process. I have written about the development of the alveolar process. So as I have told earlier, the alveolar process are those processes of the body of the mandible. At those processes there is a formation of the socket like a structure. So in that socket there is a presence of the tooth. So how the alveolar process develop is that, okay, so deciduous tooth germ, okay, deciduous tooth germ, which is in early bell stage, okay, that is in its early bell stage, divides the trough. Okay, so it particularly divides the trough. Think this is a two plates of the trough that are meeting at the midline. Okay, okay, so this is a trough. When we will see the trough from its upper portion, so it will appears like this. Okay, you guys, so it will appears like this. This is a lateral plate and this is a medial plate. Okay, so in this trough, okay, there develops the compartment. Okay, so there is development of the compartment. Okay, and this trough is get divided into different compartments. Okay, by the deciduous tooth germ that is in its early bell stage. Okay, in the different compartment, and they, okay, and they are formed more rapidly during the tooth eruption and finally enclosed totally by the growth of the bone over the different compartment. So there is a formation of the tooth compartment, and in those tooth compartment there is a tooth germ, and further there is a growth of the bone, okay, over the different compartments. So this okay, I will show you Okay, think this is a medial plate, this is a lateral plate, and we are dividing the compartment. Okay, we are dividing the compartment, and from this structure to this, okay, so as there is a small opening for the tooth, okay, so the proper finishing of this socket is done further, okay, by the growth of the bone over the different compartments. So it is easy to understand. After that, I have written here, they are formed more rapidly, during the tooth eruption. Okay, so during the process of tooth eruption, they are formed more rapidly. This is also more important, as we have heard that. So if at the old days, when there is resorption of all the tooth, okay, when there is shedding of all the tooth, there is a particularly resorption of the alveolar bones. Okay, so this point tells us that when there is a presence of the tooth, okay, there is a formation of the alveolar bone takes place more rapidly, but in absence of the tooth, there is a resorption of the alveolar bone. Now, for the development of this ramus, so in development of the ramus, there is a rapid spread of the ossification, okay, posteriorly into the mesenchyme of the first arch, turning away from the Meckel's cartilage. So in this picture I will show you. So this is a right sided Meckel's cartilage. Okay, think that it is a right side of Meckel's cartilage, and from this Meckel's cartilage, okay, so from this Meckel's cartilage, there is a rapid spread of the ossification posteriorly into the mesenchyme of the first arch, okay, turning away from the Meckel's cartilage. So they turn away from the Meckel's cartilage and develop in this pattern. Okay, so there is a formation of the ramus. Now this point of the divergence is marked by the lingula in the adult mandible. So when I will be discussing with the anatomy of the mandible, there I will discuss about the lingula. Okay, so it is one of the most important feature in the mandible. So just for now, you remember, there is a point of divergence that is marked by the lingula in the adult mandible. After that, at the 10th week, there is a development of the rudimentary mandible by the almost entirely by the intramembranous ossification. So by the 10th week of the intrauterine life, there is a formation of the rudimentary mandible, and that is formed particularly by the intramembranous ossification. Now also there is a further development of the mandible until the birth by the 3 secondary cartilages and the muscular attachments. Okay, so intramembranous ossification takes place till 10 week. Okay, so there is a formation of primary ossification center, which I have shown here. Okay, so this red color dot is a primary ossification center, but in this part, after the 10th week, there is a secondary after the 10th week, there is development of the mandible, okay, by the 3 secondary cartilages, and there is formation of the secondary ossification center. Okay, so there are 3 ossification center, secondary ossification center. Okay, 3 secondary ossification center on those 3 secondary cartilage. So first is our condylar cartilage that appears at the 12th week. Okay, 12th week of the intrauterine life, and they are formed rapidly from a cone-shaped or a carrot-shaped mass that occupies the most portion of the ramus of the mandible. Okay, so this cartilage mass forms like a mass of this condylar cartilage forms cone shaped or the carrot shaped, okay, that occupies the most portion of the ramus of the mandible in the developing ramus of the mandible, and it acts as an active center of the growth till the age of the 20 years. So this point is very, very important. Okay, so as I have written, it acts as epiphyseal cartilage. So I will explain this. So in our general anatomy, as we have learned that, okay, in our general anatomy, as we have learned, okay, so I will show you this by this pen. Okay, so think this is a bone. Okay, so we have discussed as we have learned in our general anatomy that this is epiphysis, this two portion is epiphysis, and this is a diaphysis. Okay, and between the epiphysis and the diaphysis, there is a presence of the epiphyseal cartilage. Okay, so that epiphyseal cartilage helps in the growing of the bone. Okay, it increases the length of the bone. Okay, it helps in the development, secondary development of the bone. Similarly, as like that epiphyseal cartilage, we have condylar cartilage in our mandible. Okay, so those condylar cartilage act as an active center for growth till the age of 20 years. Okay, so this is very important point to be remembered. After that, I have written here, it forms the condyles of the head. Okay, condyles head and the neck of the mandible. Okay, and also it forms the posterior half of the ramus of the mandible. Okay, so I will draw a rough picture here, just think. Okay, so this is a, I'll draw a schematic diagram. Okay, so you just, okay, so this is ramus, this is our coronate process, and this is our condylar process. So in this picture, as we can see here, this is a body of ramus and this is a body of mandible. This is a ramus of the mandible. So in ramus of mandible, we have a coronate process and we have condyloid process. Okay, condyloid, and this is coronoid. Okay, coronate process. So condyloid process. Okay, so the head of the condyle. Okay, so this is the head of the condyle and the neck of the condyle. Okay, so the neck of the mandible. Okay, so this neck of the mandible is formed by the condylar cartilage and the posterior half of the ramus. Okay, so this posterior half of the ramus, it is formed by the condylar cartilage. And in coronate cartilage, as I have written here, okay, at the 4th month of its development, transient cartilage disappear, okay, long before the birth, okay, and forms the coronate process and anterior half. So I will explain this. So coronate cartilage, it forms the, particularly the coronate process. Okay, coronate process in the mandible and the anterior half of the ramus of the mandible, and the posterior half is formed by the condylar cartilage. Okay, so as I have written, it is a transient cartilage and disappear long before the birth. Okay, so it is formed for the small time period and that is disappeared, okay, before the birth itself. Okay, so now here there is presence of a symphyseal cartilage. Okay, so in symphyseal cartilage, okay, so particularly in 2 in number. Okay, and that is between the Meckel's cartilage. Okay, so it is between the 2 Meckel's cartilage, and there is obliteration within the first year of the birth, and it appears as a small island and transient island in the developing process. So it is a cartilage that is present at the midline between the 2 Meckel's cartilage. Okay, and it is obliterated first year after the birth, and it appears as a small island and transient island. Okay, so as I have discussed all those secondary cartilages, and they are very important. Okay, so this cone shaped and carrot shaped. Okay, so they can ask you in sometime viva. So what is the shape of the mass that is formed by the condylar cartilage during its secondary development of the mandible? So at that time you can say that it is a cone shaped or the carrot shaped. Okay, so in this figure also, as I have discussed, so condylar, it forms the head, neck of the mandible and the posterior half of the ramus of the mandible. Similarly, the coronate cartilage, it forms the coronate process and the anterior half of the ramus of the mandible. Similarly, the symphyseal cartilage, it is present at the midline between the 2 Meckel's cartilage. Okay, so I think we have covered this, and after that we will be discussing with the fate of the Meckel's cartilage, and this is one of the most important topics. So those 4 points, okay, they are very important. Okay, every time they ask in a viva or also in a theory exam. So in short note they can ask, write about the Meckel's cartilage and about their fates. Okay, so let's discuss. So in most posterior part, okay, so in the most posterior part, it forms the incus malleus and the spinomalleolar ligament. Okay, so most posterior part of the Meckel's cartilage forms those 3 structures. Remember this. Okay, after that, from sphenoid to the division of the mandibular nerve, it forms the spinomandibular ligament. Okay, after, from the lingula to the forward up to the division of the inferior alveolar nerve, it degenerates, and forward from this up to the midline, it degenerates and also gives small contribution on the endochondral ossification. Okay, so just remember that. If you want to remember from which part it what it gave, then it will be better. But if you don't want to remember this, but also you should remember the things that are derived from the Meckel's cartilage, that is incus malleus, spinomalleolar ligament, spinomandibular ligament. Okay, so they 4 are very important. So I will show you this in picture. So the most posterior part, okay, so this most posterior part is forming incus malleus spinomalleolar ligament, okay, and after that from the sphenoid to the division of the mandibular nerve, it is forming the spinomandibular ligament, okay. So from the sphenoid bone to the mandibular nerve, okay, so here is mandibular nerve, and from the sphenoid it forms the, for this portion is forming the spinomandibular ligament. And from the lingula, okay, so mandibular nerve there is a lingula, and after the lingula to the inferior alveolar nerve, okay, so the division of the inferior alveolar nerve, there is a degeneration of the Meckel's cartilage, and forward from this up to the midline there is a degeneration, and there is also a small contribution on the endochondral ossification, okay. So as I have written here, ossification of the mandible, there are particularly two types of ossification that is carrying in this bone, okay, that is carried out in this bone. One is intramembranous, another is endochondral ossification. Intramembranous ossification, it forms the body of the mandible except at the its anterior part, okay, and the ramus of mandible till the mandibular foramen, okay. So it particularly intramembranous ossification forms the body of mandible except the anterior part, okay. So at the anterior part, at their midline, there is a symphyseal cartilage, okay. So that symphyseal cartilage causes the endochondral ossification, that is a secondary development, okay. Primary development is done by the intramembranous. After that, the ramus of mandible till the mandibular foramen, okay. So after the mandibular foramen, it is developed by the coronoid and the condylate cartilage, so they are formed by the endochondral ossification. So just remember, intramembranous forms the body of mandible except the anterior part, and the ramus of the mandible till the mandibular foramen, and in the second part, endochondral, it forms the symphysis of the mandible, ramus above the mandibular foramen, coronoid process, and the condylar process, okay. So we have discussed all the important points of this development of the mandible in this video. I think this much is more than enough for your university exam, but there are a lot more topic to be discussed in mandible, okay. As we can discuss the it changes in mandible, and many other topics are there in this chapter, but this what I have discussed today in this video is appropriate for a university level exam, okay. So they are best for the university level exam and to clear your basics, okay, regarding the development of the mandible, okay. So for today, this much, okay. If you love this video, please do like, subscribe, and share with your batchmate, okay. And you can also follow Mr. Tita on Instagram and the Facebook. We have pages on both the platforms, okay. I will catch you in the next video. Till then, stay tuned, stay happy, stay healthy. Tata, bye bye.